Well, good morning, everyone. I'm glad you guys are here. And we are picking up in lesson two. We'll catch up in the next couple weeks so that we're on task. But we're in Exodus chapters 5. It looks like 5 and 6. Um, it says the memory verse is the first part of 6 and 7. So chapter 6 verse 7 reads, and again I'm reading out of the Holman Christian Standard. It says, I will take you as my people and I will be your God. um then to finish out that verse, it says, you will know that I am Yahweh your God, who delivered you from the forced labor of the Egyptians. And um again, Moses was sent to uh, rescue God's people out of Egypt because they had been oppressed. Um, and not just because they were oppressed, but because the Israelites were crying out for help. They were at that point where they wanted they needed to be rescued, right? Um, Going on further, it says, I will bring you to the land that I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you as a possession. I am Yahweh. Moses told this to the Israelites, but they did not listen to him because of their broken spirit and hard labor. Um, what they were praying for, right, wasn't necessarily, hey, uh, like a coach um, going in uh, my the best illustration that I can paint was that when Moses shows up, he believed he was sent on a good mission and that he was going to do good things. But there's a difference when you go because you're told to, and then when you're committed to the task, like a coach. A coach goes and tries to motivate a team. They're the leader. They're the ones who are supposed to have experience and maybe know techniques and strategy and tactics to be able to win or achieve success. Um, but a lot of the times when you have a new coach, when you have new leadership come into your organization, you don't always get that buy-in immediately, and that's what the Israelites are facing right now. And not just that, but because when Moses showed up and was delivering the message, it wasn't all roses and rainbows and um, butterflies and all that. It was actually worse. Um, and the Bible study author has a now I know of I Love Lucy, the TV show, but they have a illustration here of what we're going to talk about, and it says Monday, October 15th, 1951. I Love Lucy first aired. And again, I don't have any idea what the show's about. I just know of it because it was turned into a slot machine at some point. There's historical references to it in like trivia games and all that. So I know that's a show, but I haven't ever watched it. And I guess I'm the one on the outside looking in. It says the show had 29 million viewers by the end of its first season. And think about it. 1951, I don't know what our population was, but that's when TV was kind of first getting around, getting real popular right after the Second World War. The United States is experiencing a lot of economic boom. Um, there's a lot of things going on uh, that's good for America, but we weren't as populated as we are today. Okay, and so it says had a um, 29 million viewers by the end of its first season. Today, it has over 40 million American viewers per year. Uh, and I don't know if Junior watches that or not, but I know he watches a lot of older shows, and I can vouch for some of this. As adults, we kind of become creatures of habit, right? We like the shows that we watch growing up or during those growing years in our adulthood and all that. So we like those what I like to call creature comforts, right? And it might be a TV show, it might be a habit. But it says one of the most popular scenes showed Lucy and Ethel wrapping candies as they came across a conveyor belt. All went well until the supervisor hollered, "Speed it up." Bedlam followed as the two could not keep up with the onslaught of candy. And what he's trying to convey, the Bible study author, is the illustration of what Moses did, or what Moses caused, right? When he comes onto the scene, again, he's promising a good thing. He's saying, we're gonna get you out of this toil, and from all looks of it, right? That's all it was. It wasn't. There wasn't even any reward at the end of the day. It was literally they were working because that's what they were assigned to do. They may have gotten some food out of it or anything, but that's what they lived to do, was to be slaves. Um, but when Moses comes up, it's not a good thing. And so backing up into chapter 5, it says, if you begin at the first verse of chapter 5, it tells about when Moses confronts Pharaoh. Um, at the end of that portion right there, it says, the king of Egypt in verse 4 said to them, "Moses and Aaron, why are you causing the people to neglect their work? Get to your work." Pharaoh also said, "Look, the people of the land are so numerous, and you would stop them from working." That day Pharaoh commanded the overseers of the people as well as their foremen, "Don't continue to supply the people with straw for making bricks as before. They must go and gather straw for themselves, but require the same quota of bricks from them as they were making before. Do not reduce it, for they are slackers. That is why they are crying out, 'Let us go and sacrifice to our God.' Impose heavier work on the men, then they will be occupied with it and not pay attention to deceptive words." See, Moses arrives. He's promising that he's gonna be able to free them. He says he's gonna go talk to leadership because that's what he was told to do. And this might sound all good, right? We might be in a similar situation where we're told something's gonna get better for us, and we're gonna go talk to leadership and get things around to where we can make it better for y'all. But leadership at the time, these I wouldn't call them slave owners, but I don't think it uses in this one. But at some point, they call them taskmasters, and those are basically the people who are making sure that the workers are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're told to impose heavier workloads on them. It would be like um, if you worked at a fast food restaurant, and not that there's more demand coming in, but that you need to crank out more work. And we see this in manufacturing. There's sometimes when I don't know, textile. I've never been in a manufacturing plant, but I imagine that. Oh, we have a Goodyear plant that's down there at somewhere around Lawton or something like that. But if there's tires, right, they're making tires, and the workers are tasked with so many output of tires to be able to hopefully sell, right? Well, it's not that demand has increased that they need more tires out, but it's just that they want to produce more tires, and so they tell the workers, "Hey, you're going to work overtime now. You're going to work, you have to sign up for these shifts, or you're going to lose your job or whatever." And people might walk away from that job today. that wasn't an option then. They literally had to work or lose their life. They were risking everything that they were living for. And it goes on. It says, so the overseers and foremen went out and said to them, "This is what Pharaoh says: I'm not giving you straw. Go get straw yourselves wherever you can find it, but there will be no reduction at all in your workload." Um, Making their job a little bit harder, not just by requiring the same output, but also that they had to go and gather their materials. Again, what we might see similar today, right? Your job tells you, if you had a desk job, that you, instead of 200 papers, right? It's like them taking your computer away and saying, "Hey, you got to go find your own computer now." But we're still gonna require you that you do all this work the same level, while you go find your computer. It's kind of messed up. And again, this is all coming because they accuse them of being oppressed. They accuse them of uh, uh, being mean to them, right? And Pharaoh's response, even the Egyptian people themselves, they were like, "Yeah, but you guys have so many people you guys could utilize to get this job done, and you guys really aren't doing any work." They were oppressing, literally oppressing them. So their first confrontation with Pharaoh made Israelites' situation worse. Egypt's leader accused the brothers of being slackers and deceivers. He treated them like slaves trying to avoid work. Pharaoh also made life harder on all the Israelites by taking away the straw they needed to make bricks. In response, the Israelites complained to Pharaoh. When that got them nowhere, they challenged Moses and Aaron and blamed them all for their troubles. Again, what I was saying earlier, a new coach coming on the scene saying that things are going to be better, things are going to work nicer and everything, but they actually get worse. They make their conditions not easier, but harder on them. And so they go back to Moses and they're like, "Well, why is this happening? Because you promised us freedom, but now we're actually having to work harder." Um, and furthermore, it talks about Pharaoh. The Bible study author talks about Pharaoh, um, not just being mad that they were slackers or whatever the terms he used right there. He's um, what does it say? Yeah, why are you causing people to neglect their work? Um, but he goes and he actually says, where does it say it? For they are slackers. That is why they are crying out. Uh, Let us go and sacrifice to our God. See, he's not taking them serious. Not not just that they are not disobeying, but they're not liking the work. But further saying that's the only reason that they're around is that they're there to serve the Egyptians, and they don't have anybody to cry out to. It's pointless because they have their own religion, right? They had I beliefs that they could be God. They they were in charge of things. They had their own authority and stuff like that, and there was no other somebody else to go to, and so they're even opposing God Himself. The idea that um, God not only sent Moses, but that He was trying to rescue His people, that He was trying to protect them, that He was trying to show them a better way. Um, in 5:2, it says, yeah, again, backing up to verse 2 in chapter 5, it says, but Pharaoh responded, "Who is Yahweh that I should obey him by letting Israel go? I do not know anything about Yahweh, and besides, I will not let Israel go." Um, In fact, the entire contrast between the God of Israel and the gods of Egypt in Exodus 5 through 15. So these next chapters that we're going to, I think we cover most of it in the next couple weeks. It serves to remove any doubt about who God is and what he's planning to do. God's emphasis on his identity also introduces a theme that runs throughout Scripture. God's declaration that he is the Lord is even more prevalent in Leviticus, Isaiah, and Ezekiel. The primary objective of the followers of Yahweh and followers of Jesus is to know him more intimately. It must be out of the knowledge that we serve him, as seen in Jesus' key question to his disciples: who do you say that I am? Again, referring to the Gospel Matthew, when he's challenging his followers on who they think he really is, not just what they're doing and who they're following and everyday life, but who really is God. And likewise, the Bible study author continues, he says, our lives as believers should be focused on growing closer to the one who loves us. He is the God who has redeemed us, and he promises himself to us. Again, we're talking about these exchanges here where Pharaoh has been sent to save, right, to rescue the God's people, but they're facing that opposition. Again, they were promised freedom, but they're not seeing it right away, and they're going to grow a little bit bitter, I guess you could call it, because like I was saying, with the coach coming on the scene, you're not going to be able to solve all the problems right away. But what it seems like when you're changing things, it's going to seem like you might be actually increasing the labor, right? You might be increasing the challenges, not just because they were bad in the first place. They were difficult to what that you're trying to impose, right? Whether it's changing the style or using your own techniques or maybe just shedding different light on things. But what the believers then, what the team should be focused on, right, is getting to know what the Bible study author is talking about, getting to know God more, getting to know the leader more. And they've forgotten that, even though that they cried out with belief, right? That's why God showed up. That's why he's sending Moses, is because they were being oppressed. They were experiencing hardship. They were literally losing probably faith. So God's going to rescue them, but it's not like they are thinking, right? Again, like the disciples and the early believers who knew what was going on when Jesus came on the scene, right? It wasn't a mighty champion with a cavalry ready to slay every non-believer. It was a lamb who was being offered up as a sacrifice. So what they were praying for was reconciliation and restoration. What the Israelites were praying for here was being rescued and being freed, but it wasn't going to come like they had planned, right? It's the same way like the illustration with Lucy and Ethel, right? The harder work isn't going to necessarily give you better results, and that's kind of the Bible study author's point, is that you're supposed to be growing in that relationship. And that growth comes through experience, and it might not always be butterflies and rainbows and all that. It comes at a cost, and that's why Jesus said that to his disciples and to his followers, was you need to count the cost at what it's going to take to be able to follow me, because most of the time, as most of us here, seasoned believers, it's not going to be easier, right? It's going to be harder. And even here, we see the first example of that when Moses was sent to free the Israelites. It became harder for them. They had to endure more. But that was part of God's plan because he was going to judge Pharaoh. He was going to judge the nation that was doing the wrong, because that's what God, he has a standard. If you don't follow him, if you don't follow his commandments, right? You don't follow his rules, there's a consequence to that. And unfortunately, Pharaoh was being given an option, just like he gives us options today to be able to either follow him or to ignore his teachings, right? And Pharaoh, unfortunately, was given a lot of chances, and he ended up costing Egypt a lot. Um, but the focus isn't on it, the focus isn't on the judgment. It's more on what the Israelites were going to get ready to go through. Again, preparing them for the entire unfolding of the plan. And the first part of it was Moses showing up, was that him letting them know that God is answering their prayer, that he's going to rescue them. But he didn't tell them that it was going to be easier, right? They just thought it was going to be an easy escape. They thought as soon as their Savior shows up that they were just going to be able to leave. That's not usually how it goes. And in fact, today, that's the illustration that we could point back to is, yeah, we know Jesus now. We know God and we know what he did for us. But now our task isn't to save ourselves because he saved us. Our task is to go out and tell other people, to testify about what he's done for us, about his teachings, right? About what he does for us every day, and to hopefully share that message until we meet him again, which he's promised us that he's going to return, that he's going to everything that is in the New Testament, right? We're studying Exodus and Leviticus, but we can apply those same teachings that we learn, right? That it starts with a relationship, that it starts with a growing relationship, that it's going to take time. It's a part of his plan. It's not going to happen overnight. Now, what we see when Pharaoh finally decides to relent, right? When he says, "Okay, I'm done with God and his punishments, set you free." It's an overnight transformation, but that didn't happen instantaneously. The people's prayers weren't answered in the way that they thought they would be answered. And that's the foundation of the lesson today, is that, yeah, God was answering the prayers, but it wasn't in the people's time. It wasn't in the people's way. And it was to set up the rest of what we call the Bible, the gospel message, the good word, that he holds to his promises, right? We seen when he established his covenant with what he was talking about in verse 6 of chapter 6. Therefore tell the Israelites, I am Yahweh, and I will deliver you from the forced slavery of the Egyptians and free you from the slavery to them. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and great acts of judgment. See, he's telling them the plan right now. He said, I will take you as my people, and I will be your God. You will know that I am Yahweh, your God, who delivered you from the forced labor of the Egyptians. And then he goes and he reminds them again of what he's doing on his end. There was an agreement, there was a covenant set up a long time ago, and he's reminding them of that covenant. So I will bring you to the land that I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you as a possession. And he goes on and explains more. And then he tells Moses again to go and keep at it. Encourages him. So go tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites go from this land. But Moses said to the Lord, said in the Lord's presence, if the Israelites will not listen to me, then how will Pharaoh listen to me, since I am such a poor speaker? Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, gave them commands concerning both the Israelites and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the Israelites out of the land of Egypt.
In my Bible, it says that
Yep. Because um, there's probably history. We could probably uh, get some research on it, but um, the what the because Israel, this generation doesn't see the promised land, and we see kind of that theme um, in other illustrations as well, but also um, it kind of applies to Judas when he doesn't see immediate results. When the Pharisees and the Sadducees don't see immediate results, they are quick to judge. They're quick to, and there has to be experience with that. So Pharaoh, um, he didn't see any immediate results, right? And that's what the Bible study author wants us to realize, that when we go and we establish that relationship with God, it's on His terms. It's not on our terms. We're submitting to Him. That's what it means to submit when it's His plan. We have to understand that it's on His timeline as well, and that's Pharaoh's downfall, is that um, his time was up. His time with the Egyptians, or with the Israelites, was up, but he didn't want to release. He didn't want to let go, because they thought of those populations. It wasn't just the Israelites, even though they were God's people. It was other things going on at the time, that they were possessions, that they were His, and you know, probably at some point he talked with Pharaoh, and he gave him signs that, hey, this isn't going to be forever, right? Because he had it was I don't think it was this same king, or um, God incarnate person. But remember how the Egyptians got there was through uh, was it Jacob, Joseph, one of them, who had the interpretation, right, and saved them, and then he brought his family, and then they brought more, and that's how they ended up there, was because they saved, God saved them. It wasn't Egypt's gods, it was the one true God, and their time was up with them, and so he said to release them, and he's battling, right, and again, that's on God's timeline. There was a point that there's a point to be made here, is that when it's time to go, it's time to go. When God says to do something, it's time to go ahead and do that. And it might be just as simple, even though it wasn't as simple for Pharaoh, because that was his entire labor force. But you need to listen to him, because he's going to bring judgment if you don't. It might have been a blessing in the beginning, but it's going to be a curse, or it's going to be what we see here carried out as plagues, as reconciliations of what we are doing against God, right? Going against His word, and that doesn't happen overnight. It's a hard heart, because you're establishing a reputation. You're establishing who you are, and by operating by that, right? If you don't see change, you don't see an opportunity to do better. That's what drives you. And sometimes, when God comes up, we don't instantly recognize it, because we have those calluses that you have to break through, right? Um, I always use this example to myself. I'll share it with you guys. Is that, there's some people that go out and run on the grass and all that barefoot, and run on the road and all that type of stuff. Because they've trained like that, right? Whether that's growing up as kids or whatever. I can't, because I've worn shoes my entire life. I can't go out there and just be free like that, because it'll hurt my feet. But what that is that that experience of doing that, the same way we experience charity, we experience uh, going out and doing things for others. If you're not used to it, you're more than likely not going to do it. But if you are used to it, it's no problem. It's actually comes as a probably your second nature, right? To be able to give, to be able to see those things, right? And the only way you can do that is by getting closer to God, by being able to experience those fruits from Him instead of those other things that are out there in the world, right? What my brother here and other brothers say is that, you know, if you're used to being that way, right, and God's not or the devil's not bothering you, right? The evil ones, he's it's not apparent that there's something going on right there, then it's probably because you're not walking with God. You're not opposing the world. You're not in that on that path that he talks about, that straight and narrow. You're probably on the wide and the broad and wide. And that's what Pharaoh got caught with, was, you know, he was used to the way that things were. He wasn't going to allow God to change him. He wasn't going to allow God to change his life, the people around him, his nation. He was opposing him. And so when you do that and you take it as far as Pharaoh did, right, you're trying to capture the whole population of God's people. You're going to experience a little conflict. You're going to experience a judgment. And so we see here, I don't know if we get to, let's see, that's probably, I know that okay. No, we don't get to explore too much of it, but we're going to see some of the plagues, and hopefully we'll cover some of this Wednesday before we get into the holidays. But we see right here where it's lining up, where we're going to see judgment on Egypt, and where Pharaoh is going to cost his people a lot, what ends up to be a lot, right? But we see the establishment of what we like to call a holiday, but we see the establishment of the Christian belief of Passover, and the what it means to be the rituals established in that, and the basis for what Jesus established as one of our main ordinances here in a Baptist church, or in some of the other churches that recognize those same ordinances as well. But it was because he was doing something that was rescuing he was living up and fulfilling his part of the covenant promise that he made with the forefathers. And so, any questions, comments, real quick before we get started with church? All right. Brother Chris, dismiss us from Sunday school with a prayer, please.